Wow, so many people for a 2 hour session. That's very brave of you. Are you really sure you want to stay for 2 hours with me? Yeah? Right? All right, bar the door, lock them in. They can't go out. Hi everyone, I'm Daniel. I work with the Spring team. You know my spiel if you've seen me yesterday. I work in the Spring security team, doing security-related stuff. So Spring security, Spring authorization server, SAML session, these kind of things. Ooh, kicking in. Hey, I'm Daniel. You can find me on the internet, on Blue Sky, on the web, on GitHub, on the email, and then also on LinkedIn. People find my name on LinkedIn because there's actually one of me. If you see a dude with a mustache, that's my dad, but he's retired, so don't try and connect with him. And so for this session, I think for 2 hours, I need a lot of energy to go through this, so I'm going to channel my inner Josh Long. Okay, we're ready. Let's do it. Little disclaimer. 2 disclaimers before we get into the deep end of testing. So this talk is not about how to write your tests in general, right? It's not about how to architecture your test, what shape of testing, like is it a test pyramid or a trophy or an inverted diamond turning around. I don't know what the cool kids do these days for their tests. If you want to find out, you can go to YouTube, you type DevOps testing, and then you'll find great videos with great content by amazing speakers. I think Victor Rentea did a 3-hour deep dive at DevOps Belgium. So plenty of content. That's not what I'm going to be talking about today. Today, it's all about testing Spring Boot applications. So we are going to be showing Spring Boot tests a lot, right? And like Spring-specific stuff. But please do not take away from the session that you want to put Spring Boot tests everywhere. Do not do this, right? This is at the margin. Your domain is not Spring specific. Like your domain should not care about Spring. Your unit tests do not need Spring inside or Spring Boot or whatever, right? You're writing your unit tests that validate your logic. All the Spring Boot tests we see here is going to be for more like integration testing. I don't know how you want to call it. Maybe not end-to-end, but something that tests a little bit deeper in the stack of your application, right? So although I will show a lot of Spring Boot tests, please remember that there's something else out there. All right, and with that, the program for today is big. I am not sure we will be able to cover everything during the 2 hours of this session. Some of these things you will know, right? We'll start small and then get into more and maybe more technical, more important stuff that you need to know. But we'll lay down the basics with like web testing. We'll do 2 small breaks, small ad breaks in the middle where we talk about what's in the toolbox that's maybe less related to Spring. And we'll see whether you want to take a break in the middle or if you're feeling really brave. Ooh, the timer is running now. Okay, good. All right. So without further ado, let's talk about web testing. So this conference is about testing. It's not about building Spring Boot apps. So I have an app, and then we'll use that for testing it. If you've seen my presentations in general, you'll know that I am absolutely amazing with coming up with great life, real prod scenarios. Right, to do, you've done that. So the first thing you do is a to-do application, perfect, and then you have to make it delightful for the audience to look at. So this runs localhost 8080. Yep, there you go. Beautiful, no? Yeah, you're glad you came here. So it's a basic to-do application. You can add to-do. So go to. I can't type go. Go to London. Eurostar is great. And then give talk at DevOps UK. Okay. And every time I add a to-do like this, it's a simple post-back application. So it makes a post and then reloads the page. And then, I don't know, question mark and profit. Chat with attendees. That's the most fun part of a conference, right? And so when I complete a thing, same thing, right? I still want to show you that I have up-to-date skills. When I click here, it expands, and this is JavaScript, right? So I can write some JavaScript. Here you go, to-do.js, see, like real JavaScript. Okay, enough. This is our app. We test it. So when you go to our friend Josh's second favorite place on the internet, when you go to start.spring.io, and then you do any project, you look at the details of what Spring Initializer gives you, and it will do two things related to tests. So one, it gives you Spring Boot starter test here. So this will pull in all the required dependencies for testing. So, Mockito, Spring Test, AssertJ, and so on. And it gives you a free test. So in here, right, this test that we all know, Spring Boot test does nothing, but it exists. So I have that in my project. We can start with this. It's here. And hopefully, this should run, be green. Okay, off to a good start. So this is not super interesting. This test doesn't do anything. It just starts your application. So it verifies that you're not, your dependencies are correct. You're not injecting crazy properties inside. You're not going and being like server port lol. All right. Oh, it's here. Lol. All right. So if I do this, first IntelliJ is unhappy, but if I run the test is going to be unhappy as well because the server port must be a integer, right? So it gives you a little bit of value, but not that much. What you really want to do is actually test the contents of our application. So in here, I'm going to call this to do mock MVC tests, right? And so when you do this, who's never written a mock MVC test here? One person? Two people, three people? Okay, so you all know this, but let's get started. So you auto-configure mock MVC, and then you auto-wire, usually mock MVC, right? And then from here, you can do functional tests on your app from the API. So like add to do, and then in here, you would do like to do, MVC, perform, and then you have to do post. So post in here is in mock MVC request builders, this one. And you do a bunch of stuff. And so you have these static methods, and then you can expect, and then you have to like import this other static method. So this is the old way of doing things. The new way of doing things, and the nicer way, is we have introduced a new class in Spring Boot 3.4 in November, I think. Mock MVC Tester. Who knows about Mock MVC Tester? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so you know about Spring's web client and REST client that replaced the REST template? Well, the Mock MVC Tester is that, but for Mock MVC. So now we have a Fluent API that allow you to talk to your app in kind of a nicer way without these static imports and complicated things you can't discover. So in here I can do, I'm going to do a get, and then it has a URI, so I'm going to, we want to add it to do, so I'm going to do a post. The URI is to do slash, that's it. So maybe one thing you would notice if you use IntelliJ, if you auto-wire mock MVC, old MVC, right? Import. So if you do this and you perform post mock MVC request builders, you would notice that our friends at JetBrains autocomplete for you. They discover your controller and they do that. You don't have it yet, but it's coming. I trust them. They will do it. They will do the right thing. So we pass a few parameters to this, a few in the body of the request, if you will. So there's going to be a text to do. Hello, DevOps UK. And then a description of the to-do description. It's fun to be here with you all. Okay. And then from this, you do exchange. That gives you a response, right? And this response, you can pull stuff from it, right? If you really want, in here, you can like get the response and then get the body and so on, right? Content, I can't remember, content as a string and so on. But this also integrates with AssertJ. So we'll look at AssertJ a little bit later, but that allows you to do this. Assert that. So static method, this is AssertJ. And so I can say assert that response has status, right? And this is found because when I post it to do, it redirects me. Okay. And the redirect URL is slash, right? Like this. So much nicer. Is the font size all right in the back? Bigger? Yeah, okay, my bad. Sorry. Bigger? Oh, scroll up. The bottom you can't see. Right, so I have to do this. Good? Yeah, okay. So, I do this, and then it adds my to-do, and shouldn't explode. Perfect. So now I can verify that my to-do has been added. So one way I can do this is MVC get. So no more crazy import. URI is slash, and then exchange, and this is the main page, and then assert that main page has status okay, right? And then body text contains hello devox UK exclamation mark, right? So if I run this again, it should be adding my to-do, so my to-do should be visible on the main page. Perfect. If I get my things wrong, because I think this is Devox France ici, right? So if I put Devox France, this should fail, because there's only Devox UK in the page. The error message is not great. It will tell me, here we go, red. It says, we expected an actual response, which is the entire HTML page, to contain hello Devox France. So if I look at this page, I can squint a little bit, and then at some point I will see Devox UK here, right? Not great, but still I get my response. Devox UK, great. Okay, so a few things to note here. So mock MVC tester, great. This auto-wired thing, this is enabled by Spring Boot test. The way this is enabled is because Spring Boot test pulls in the Spring extension. So this extend with is JUnit that allows you to add capabilities to your tests. Some of the capabilities of the Spring extension is this auto-wired. If you look at how this works in JUnit, it's basically a way to register before all, change the class, change the methods. Yeah, go away, you. Change the methods in your test class, right? It transforms the instance of your test to add stuff to it. So you can auto-wire this here. You could also auto-wire it here. Auto-wired mock MVC tester, MVC. So if you have multiple beans and you want to test one test with one bean and the other with a different type, right? You could use your qualifier here and do some Spring stuff if you want to do that. We support this as well. The interesting bit is this mock MVC tester, it lives in Spring Boot test, right? In Spring Framework test, sorry. So it's not in your production code, but you can get any bean from your production class in here as well. You can auto-wire, say the to-do repository that contains my to-dos, right? So with this, I can find the to-dos, to-do repositories, find all to-dos, and then assert that to-dos has size 1. There's one to-do in the to-do repository after this. And so this means I can use it anywhere in the class. I can use it in a setup method as well. So if I want to clean up my to-do repository before I run my test, I am allowed to do this as well. So this should work. Still verifying, right? TDD, green, perfect. So when doing this, you can access any bean. You can also replace beans. So you used to be able to do mock bean. This was deprecated because mock bean was a Spring Boot thing, and we moved it to Spring Framework. So now use Mockito bean, same semantics, works the same way, and you can swap a bean for something that is a mock. In our case, we're doing an integration test, so I rather have the real implementation in here. Okay, so that's for making requests against my app and looking at it. It's very similar to just going, in my terminal and saying HTTP, I want to do AT and then to do, and then I post text égale bonjour. Maybe I have to put some quotes here. Text égale bonjour, devox, and then post that as a form, right? And so now should be have a bonjour devox here. So interacting as if I were using curl or Postman or any HTTP client you use. But my app is an HTML front end. It's designed to be used by humans. And so when I want to make integration tests, I tend to look at it from the perspective of the users who are humans, who are going to be going in a browser and then clicking on things and navigating and looking at the page. So the traditional way of doing this is you would launch a real browser and drive that. So you will use in Java, you would use something like Selenium that uses a web driver. It starts Chrome or Firefox or Edge, whatever you use as a browser, then clicks and so on. It's very heavyweight. If you're doing that in CI, it means you need, you need Selenium to download Chrome, put it in your image, or you need to pre-download it, add it. It's big. There's a simpler way to do this if you have, simple to medium use cases. So let's do that. To do web client, or let's call it browser test. Browser tests. Yeah? Okay, so this one here is a Spring Boot test as well. It also auto-configures mock MVC, but instead of injecting the mock MVC tester as we did before, we now inject a web client, right? And then we'll write a test. So this web client, what do we do? Add to do, we'll call it add to do as well. So this web client here, this is not Webflux. So if you look at where this comes from, it comes from HTML unit. So you have to add this dependency in your build file, in your POM, in your build.gradle, this one here. But it's integrated, sorry, I have to scroll up for the people in the back. This is integrated with Spring Boot. So we create one of these web clients and we link it to your application, and then you can use it and pretend that a human is using a browser. So basically, this is a lightweight Java headless browser. So it understands the web semantics. I can say I get the page, the main page. Fine, this is index, right? This is an HTML page from JUnit. Can throw, of course. And then from here, you can pretend you're using a browser. So you can say, I don't know, query selector. What does that page look like? Index.html. So this index has a form. So the form has an input, new to do. It has a text area for the description, new to do description, and a button, add button. Okay. So I can find those. So new to do, and this is going to be an HTML input, and it's called to do. It's called to do text. To do text. Cool. And then we have a HTML text area for to do description. So this one is new to do description. And then we'll have an HTML button that we can click on, add button, and index, query selector, add button, right? And so as a human, you go and you do to do text, and then I type, let's say, hola, devox, right? And then you can do in the description, and then you can type, que bueno estar con ustedes, right? And then you click the button. So when you click the button, as a human, I get redirected. So I get a new page here. So I could do web client, get page, and then get the index page again. Or I can say, well, this thing triggers a redirect. So give me the page in here. Page equals this. Ooh, I called it index, right? So I get redirected. And now, using, again, web APIs, I can find the to-do that I added on the page. So I can do pay or index, query, oops. So index.query selector all. I want to find all to do, and then the text and the to do, I put them in data role text. Fine. So these are the to do text, and so maybe in here I get I want the text content. Get text content, right? And then I get the last one to list. Get last, and this is the latest to-do, right? And so then I can assert stuff on that latest to-do. Import this one. So latest to-do is equal to, so if I put something wrong, hello devox, this should fail now. But we will see that it fails with the text, right? So instead of having hello devox, we have the real thing, which is hola devox in here. So in this thing, I can see the page from the request above, right? I can see the details of the request in my logs, but I have a much nicer error message that's saying, rather than saying, you know, oh, here's a giant string of HTML, good luck finding what's wrong in there. It tells you, well, in that thing you've asked from me, there was hola devox and not hello devox. So let's fix it. Hola devox, right? By doing this, I can also do a little bit of JavaScript and a little bit of, you know, dumb APIs that I can touch. So in here, index, query selector, let's find all the descriptions. So data role equals description. The description of my to-dos, if you remember, it was the thing I could collapse. And then I want these are nodes. Oh, let's get the first. Or maybe the last, get last, right? Latest description. So when I add a description, it's not displayed. So I can say assert that latest description is displayed, this one is false, right? So I add my to-do, there's a description, but this description is hidden, so run this, should still be green. Great. And now I can do some JavaScript. So there's a button to toggle that description. Index, query selector. I think it's called toggle all. Let me verify so that. Yep. So there's a button here, toggle all, that toggles all the descriptions. So when I do this, this is an HTML button. I can click it. HTML button. So this doesn't reload the page. It does JavaScript. So I put this here, and now I can verify my latest description, and now it's displayed. Right? So find the button, click it. My web client browser runs the JavaScript and unfolds the description and shows it. So there's a limit to what you can do here, right? If you have a full single page app, please do not try and test it with this. This will go horribly wrong. You can do many things. So when you configure this web client, you can get it, and then you can do a bunch of crazy things with it. Get options, right? In here, so for example, you could set the location of the user, right? To say, oh, I'm in Spain here, so I get a different message. But as if you go into, you know, more advanced stuff, so if you have fetch, so if your code calls some other website from the page, it's not the real fetch that runs in a real browser that you'll have. It's a fake thing in Java. If you were yesterday at my passkeys talk, so like advanced, like sign in with biometrics into your website, you can't do that with this web client. And it's unlikely you'll be able to do it for a long time. So if you have a full, you know, single page app, then it's probably written in JavaScript or TypeScript. So use the tools of that ecosystem to test the full things, right? So use what do you use these days? That like Cypress, Playwright, stuff like that. Cypress, right? So stuff like these things. Not web client for a more advanced use case, but for a little internal website, you want to test the pop-up that you can close it, this might be a great fit because it's much simpler, it's lightweight, it's written in Java, you don't need external dependencies. Okay. So one last bit that I want to talk about on these web tests. We've been, every time, doing this auto-configure mock MVC. So in here, there's something that says mock MVC. What's the difference between this and the real production app? Well, when I take the real production app, I rerun it, so restart, and then we can look at the logs. So in here, when this, go away macOS, when this runs, it says Tomcat started on port 8080. So, oops, sorry for the people in the back. And boop, there we go. So Tomcat started on port 8080. It's running, I can talk to it. And then I wrote some Tomcat specific stuff myself. So here's the logging valve, right? Please do not do this. This is terrible, terrible code. If you want to do stuff like that, use the real thing. There's a huge message that I wrote to shout out you not to do this, but it showcases, okay, this actually leverages the servlet API, or no, not even the servlet API, the Tomcat APIs to modify how I handle requests, and this just puts some logs in the console. So when I go to my main app and say I refresh here, and I go to the console, I have extra logs that come up that I wrote for this. So this says, oh, user with IP 127.0.0.1 requested a page / and we responded with 200. Okay, so that's the real prod application. But if I take my tests and say run, yeah, the browser tests are fine. And I run this, and I go look at the logs in here. That's, yeah, I know it's read-only. Oh, come on. Oh, because it's over. Well, sorry. I'll scroll as much as possible. So in here, it will tell me I started the test in 2 seconds, but you will see no mention of Tomcat in here. Because the mock MVC that we have at the top says it's the mock stack. It's not a real web server. It's slightly smaller. And in here, we don't have the logs from Tomcat. So some of the features are very tied to your servlet container. If you're doing sessions, for example, and you want to verify how your custom serialization of a session goes into a database, mock MVC will not help you, because mock MVC does mock sessions, not the real sessions. So the only thing you can do here is actually add this Tomcat to your tests. So we can create a new test, to do Tomcat tests. And this is a Spring Boot test, but I configure it to have Tomcat. And you do this by setting the web environment. So in here you have a few options. So the default is mock. So it starts a mock stack that pretends to be able to, well, it does handle requests and responses, but mock requests and responses. You can have none. If your Spring application is a CLI app and you want to test it, you can still do none, and then you won't have a web server. Or maybe you want to test some stuff without starting the web stack, you can do that. What we want is Tomcat to be loaded, so we have to use either define port or random port. So define port would use whatever port is defined in your application properties, or you can overload it here, like server.port equals 1234. If I do this, every time I run this test, it will start Tomcat on port 1234, which might be a problem because I might have something else running on port 1234. So it's not a great idea. Instead, we would recommend using the random port here as much as you can. Right? So this will find whatever port is available on your machine and then have Tomcat listen on that port. So let's do a test here. Let's say, what do we do is do add to do the same one. So what is, yeah, okay. It's not public, sure. Ah, thank you. Wrong test. Oh, no, this. Wrong. Come on, give me a test. Give me a test. Give me JUnit 4. Here we go. Thank you. Add to do. So to do this, I'm going to use what we had in the browser tests. So I'm going to steal those. Okay. Oop, no, put it here. So a few differences here. IntelliJ is yelling at me because it says there's no web client in here, and it's true because the web client by default, when it's auto-wired, it's bound to my mock MVC stack. So if I wanted this, I would need to do auto-configure mock MVC, but doing that defeats the whole purpose of actually having a real thing. So I have a web client here, but then I'm going to make it a real, or I'm going to build this instance myself. Web client. And so now I need to talk to, in here, I need to talk to something that runs a localhost and on some random port here, right? This random port, you can have it injected by using the local server port annotation here, and then this is private int port. Right, oops. So with this, port. Here we go. So with this, we have a Tomcat. It starts, and then I can make requests to it. So let's run it. And we'll see in the logs. Okay, so in here, hibernate, and then it says Tomcat started on port 62917, right? And then when I make requests, all the Tomcat features are actually triggered. So if I want to test complicated or web-related features, I might need to be doing this. What's really cool too is you can go here. Let's put a breakpoint. And then I right-click on this breakpoint, and I will tell it to suspend only the thread. So this breakpoint will only stop the thread that runs the test, not any other thread. Crucially, not the Spring app that's running. So let's do this, and then I debug this test. Okay, so the test has started running, and in here I can see somewhere I have a page, or I could just do this, the port, right? So it found a new random port, 62992. So now I can go in my browser and do localhost 62992, right? This is the instance of my app that was started to run this test in a different browser, right? It's not this. It's not what is visible to this web client here. So if I make calls here, it doesn't necessarily show exactly the same thing that's on the page. It would be the same as opening two tabs, right? So I have a tab for my app, for my browser, and then I have a tab in my IntelliJ, if I will. But the cool thing is, if I let that virtual browser add a to-do, F8, boom, then now when I refresh here, it's visible in the running application, and I can go and inspect that. So if I have more complex stuff, right, I can go and I can click, and then I can take a look, and then I can have a better understanding of what's on the page instead of having this giant HTML that I take it, paste somewhere in a text editor to understand what's happening. Same, I can interact with this. So I could be adding to-dos here. So if I add a to-do, something else, right? So if I add a to-do here, I change the state of my app. So if I continue my test, the test will be wrong because there's one more to-do that has been added. So it could be useful for you, for example, to... Ooh, it passed. For reasons. Good question. I don't know. Maybe it had picked up the last to do already. I don't know. So this is interesting if you want to set up some data. Before writing all the code you need to do your setup, you can go interact with your app, see what your test feels like, and then implement that. Whew! All right, we're done with web testing. So takeaways from this. Mock web environment.mock is the default for Spring Boot tests, and it doesn't start your web server for real, and it's great for the vast majority of use cases. Sometimes you need the web server to start because you're actually interacting with the APIs, the serverless APIs, say the sessions is a common use case. So you would be using web environment.randomport, and it's very useful for debugging, but don't forget to only suspend the thread of the test. If you suspend everything, your app is stopped and it will not be serving requests. And so you can get your port with local server port. Mock MVC tester, if you're doing request-based testing, so if you're testing an API or if you want to have something that looks at the text but is not great for doing HTML stuff, mock MVC tester. If you're stuck in 2024, you can do mock MVC. It's great. It still works. It's still supported. We're not going to remove it, but the new APIs are fancier and nicer. If you do browser-based testing, web client, lightweight, great for simple applications. If your applications are big, they're single page, they have lots of JavaScript, this is not going to fly. So you'll use the proper tools for this, right? So Playwright, Cypress, or Selenium if you're doing Java. And if you want like the real web APIs as they run, right? Especially for things that are different per browser, right? So if the I don't know what is like the latest stuff, but like maybe the passkeys thing is not exactly implemented in the same way in different browsers, then you probably want to drive a real browser. Okay. Do we have questions so far? Yes. What about Spring Security? That is
Enabled by default.
this is an excellent question. So question is, what about Spring Security? Is, my friend, you have to stay awake until the end. I'm sorry, this is point number 8, but we will get to that. I'll show you the tools and techniques for that, because I'm an annoying security guy, and I see you in the audience disabling security for your tests. Do not do that. That's wrong. And I'll give you the tools for doing that. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about this text context thing. That's a Spring framework concept for making your tests slightly better or slightly faster, slightly easier to run. Because this to-do application, it's great. It's amazing. It runs in production. Amazing. I understand that it might not be a good representation of your real applications that run in production. Usually, you have 526 Hibernate entities, so wiring them up takes a whole minute. So everything is more complicated. The app is slower to start, and so it might be more painful. Let's simulate that. Like, we're going to turn this on in a production ready application. So I'm going to create a bean, and let's do a type. I'm going to call this slow bean, right? And so we're going to make this production ready by making it slow. Okay. So we have now a bean of type slow bean. Slow bean returns a new slow bean. Doesn't have to do anything. It just has to be slow. How can I make it slow? Yeah, thread asleep. Amazing. We all have good coding practices. So off seconds. Let's sleep for 1 second. Okay. And then we can make a little bit of logging. Right. Put a snail. Configuring slow bean. Oops, bean. And then the snail is happy. Ta-da! Done. All right. Let's take this one, put one here, and then we're going to make a variable so it's easier to remove. All 3 occurrences. This is the sleep duration. Duration, and then I'm going to make that a field. Sleep duration. Cool, and then put it in the field. Yeah, here we go. So now my app will be more like a real production application, except it has cool emojis. Yes, IntelliJ, trust me, I pay for this. Okay, here we go. So it takes 3 more seconds to start, and so my tests pay that cost, of course, right? So if I go to this test package, if I run all the tests in here, then I will see on the screen configuring slow bean, and it's slow and a bit painful, right? But, happens again here, but you've noticed that this test here was surprisingly fast, right? It didn't pay that extra cost of starting up. In fact, if I take my to-do mock-MVC test, this one here, and I copy it, 1 test, okay? And I copy it again, 2 tests. Amazing. And then again, 3 tests. Okay, and I run this again. Now 3 tests starts, and it's a bit slow, right? 1, 2, 3. But then mock-MVC, boom, boom, boom. Mock-MVC, 1 test, browser test were fast, and then 2 tests is fast as well. Tomcat is slow. The reason is the Spring testing framework realizes that your application here, 3 tests, is exactly the same as the one in 1 test. Exactly the same as the one in to-do mock-MVC test. Basically, they have the same configuration. So what it does is the first time it finds it, it puts it in a cache. And then the next test that is configured exactly the same will be reused. So I can auto-wire any bean, that's fine, right? I can change which beans are auto-wired. This is okay. But I cannot change the nature of the app. So if I go and change these things, so for example, if I say this has a profile, because I have a testing profile, testing Devox UK. If I go to the 2 tests and I say, oh, well, this one is a mojito bean, all right? So change that, and then maybe remove the contents of the test, right? And then 3 tests, I don't know, I add some properties. properties devoxuk.fun.enabled equals true, right? Or if I do this, no, don't do this, don't, no. But just changing the property is a different app, because this could change many, many things. With Spring, we have ways of writing conditionals on properties, so I could have different beans loaded in my app. So this is definitely different. So now if I run my tests again, then I'm going to be paying the cost every single time. So 3 tests is slow, but it's different from to do mock MVC test. So to do mock MVC test starts and it's slow, and then 1 test is slow, and so on. You get the idea, right? So avoid doing this thing. Instead, you keep your tests neat with the same context. So 1 test, same, right? 2 tests, same 2, right? Okay, keep them the same. The trade-off here is that this is the same running application. So for my 3 tests, they have the same database. So let's see what's the orders. So this runs the 3 tests, and to do mock MVC, then the 1 test. So let's take the 1 test, and I don't do the cleanup in the beginning. I remove this entirely. So my test here assumes I add a to-do, and then I count, and there's 1 to-do. But now these tests all share the same context. They all share the same database. So if I run my tests again, this test here is going to fail because to do mock MVC test adds a to do. So there's 1 to do in the database, 1 test adds a to do, and so now I have 2 to dos in my database, right? The others, they work because I clean up my context before by doing to do repository dot delete all. So I have to do the work now to make my test independent if I'm reusing the context across tests. If you want to put this back, if you want to inspect what's happening and you want to get a little bit of an idea of how this is playing out, how many contexts do I have, which ones are considered equals or not, you can do. Let's go here. We add a directory, resources, and you add say application.properties, and in here you do logging.level.org.springframework.test. And so in here you can set it to trace. Trace is very, very verbose. Debug already gives you a little bit of information here. So now if we rerun our tests, the configuration is configuration. This one is too painful. I don't want to sleep anymore. I want you to be awake, so no sleep. Good. So now if I run my test, I'll have a little bit more logging in the test and I'll see the details. So for example, here in to do mock MVC test in the beginning, you'll see a bunch of debug info that comes from springframework.test. And so in here, you will see stuff like test context cache statistics. So in the cache for my tests, there is 1 entry, and it has a max size of 32. So I can have 32 different applications running at the same time. Here's the number of times I found the context when trying to access it, so say to auto-wire a bean. I missed, there was a failure. I failed to find an entry in the cache once, which was for the first test. If I go to the Tomcat test, then I get the same type of messages. Here, maybe slower. Here you go. So Tomcat test. The Tomcat test is different because it adds all the servlet stack. So I have more beans. It's a different app. So in here now I have 2 apps in my cache. And I have 2 cache misses, the initial miss and then the second miss when I do this. So it helps you debug a little bit how many contexts you have and when they're set up and how they're different, because your test may have many, many beans. You may be changing them more than what I do in the demo here, so you might need a little bit of help to debug them. So the takeaway from this is that the Spring Boot tests compared to raw unit tests where you do like new to-do service and then call methods on it are much slower, right? A unit test is milliseconds. A Spring Boot test is more an order of magnitude of seconds. So it's going to be slower than that. So you want to avoid creating many, many different apps in your test. You want to pay the cost once, twice, not 600 times, and now suddenly your test suite is 15 minutes long, and so you don't run it every time. Who here has a test suite that takes more than 5 minutes for unit tests? Yeah, no shame. Yeah, right. I mean, I have that on legacy projects as well. So, and it's painful, right? You don't want to run your test suite every time you make a change because 5 minutes is a long time, right? I want my test suite to be, max 1 minute, right? I make a change, I can run the entire suite, and then boom, boom, have that cycle. So reuse the cache context to avoid paying the starter price every time, still being aware that there are trade-offs. So you want your tests to be very unique and not pollute each other. Okay, any questions for this test context part? Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned void the active profiles, but does the context actually accept it? You have the same profile, what you want about the test?
So the question is, I said avoid active profiles. If I have the same profile in multiple tests, yes, Spring Test will detect that it's the same app. So you're allowed to use active profiles, but don't do like 42 different active profiles. If you have one active profile for your test, it's fine to have it and have it in all your tests. Actually, you can even write your own annotation, right? So if you're going to add active profiles everywhere to every test, or like auto-configure mock MVC for every test, you can add an annotation, right? Devox UK tests. Right, and then you can meta annotate this. Spring Boot test, active profiles, Devox. Put it in, it says like commas, I think, right? And then retention and runtime and so on, right? So a bunch of things that you need to set, but then you can use this annotation instead of using Spring Boot test. You use that everywhere. As long as there's one annotation that's used, so one test context, then you'll be fine.
Is it correct for the webflux as well?
It works for the webflux as well, but you will use different dependencies. But I think you do auto configure mock MVC, and it has a webflux equivalent of like web test client, I think it's called. It will work exactly the same. This Spring Boot test context is really about the Spring container, right? Finding beans, wiring beans, deciding what an app is, refreshing the context. You'd be doing that. Okay, all right. Yes? So that works within the context of slices as well. My friend, you are one step ahead. We're going to be talking about this. Very good, lovely. But I want to do a little ad break before we get into test slices and discuss how we can make our context smaller. So I said this is Spring Boot testing, and Spring Boot testing is actually a Spring Boot starter test. So let's take a look at what's inside Spring Boot starter tests. So Gradle, it's called To-Do's app, I think. Wait, I don't remember. To-Do's app, all right. So Gradle, To-Do's app, dependencies, and then the configuration is this is test, runtime, class, path. Right, so here are the dependencies of my tests of this app. So if I look at the details, of course I'll have the prod dependencies. So Spring Boot, starter, data, JPA, because my prod app is in my test, or like my prod code is in my test. So I get these dependencies. But if I scroll down far enough, I get Spring Boot starter test, and we can see the details of what's inside. So there's all the cool stuff about testing. So there's Spring Boot test that will give you some tooling. There's Spring test that gives you, so this one gives you, for example, at Spring Boot test. This one, Spring test, gives you the Spring extension. But there's stuff that's not related to Spring. So we have the same philosophy in testing as we have in prod. It's like we give you same defaults out of the box. So for example, I've been writing my test using AssertJ. So you can write AssertJ assertions because it's bundled in Spring Boot test. We assume you want to write tests. We assume you want to have assertions. We give you two options, right? AssertJ or Hamcrest if you like old school static import method. We give you Awaitility. We give you, I don't know, JSON something something, Sky Screamer. ominous, for writing JSON assertions, XML unit. So a bunch of things that are in that package. So one of the cool tools that I like using is, let's do the to-do Tomcat test, is a Spring Boot extension that is not in Spring Boot test that you have to import yourself. So you do add extend with. So extend with is JUnit. And then we give you an extension that's called output capture extension. So output capture extension is going to hijack the console, so system out and system error, and make it available in your test so you can write tests against your console. So in here I can inject a captured output, captured output. And with this, I can interact with what was in the console. So in here, I could say, well, captured output, get standard out, standard error, both. I don't know. Let's get both. And we get the lines. Last line. So what's the get last to list? Get last. So what was the last constant line? What was it like? Last log line. And with this, we could say assert that last log line contains, and so these log lines, they look like maybe in my tests, to do Tomcat tests. Here we go. User with IP requested blah blah blah. Right. So they look like this. So it contains that. Right? And so I can verify if I have, say, structured logging and I want to verify that my structured logging works. I can look at the actual logs, not even the log events, but like the text that comes out that a log agent would look at. So let's run this. Right? So the log line is okay. If I change it, right, if I say this is a localhost instead of the IP, then this would fail. And would tell me, yeah, okay, this is incorrect. You expected the actual line that looks like this, with this IP here to contain IP with localhost. That's not the case. So I can make assertions like this. Don't abuse it. Like, you don't want to be using the console to test the state of your app. This is more like, hey, I have requirements on the logs, on the audit logs that I produce. I want to do integration tests on them. This is a great tool for that. Another thing that I mentioned was AssertJ. So let's look at AssertJ. Tools tests. Who uses AssertJ here? Half the room? Yeah, okay. AssertJ is cool. Right? So AssertJ, so if you're doing JUnit, you have matchers in JUnit already. So JUnit will give you these. Come on, import, right? JUnit. So you could say assert that Daniel equals, I don't know, Mark, right? So you can do that, but like the error messages are not super nice. It's just JUnit wants to give you something so you can write tests without importing a library, but AssertJ is a much nicer thing you can use for that. So let's make books. Book, string, title, string, author, right? So we'll have a list of books, list of book. Yes, that's one book. Books, it's a list of new book. So we say, you know what I did yesterday? I updated IntelliJ. I now regret this decision. It's probably fine, but okay. So the new book, the 5th season, N.K. Jemisin. New book, the 3-body problem, value chin, a new book, a memory called Empire, Arcady Martin, and then let's do a retro one, new book, Foundation, Asimov. Right, okay. Recognize these books? What do they have in common? Science fiction? Yeah, they're Hugo novel winners. So, and then wrap this because I know this is going to format in a horrible way that, oops, no. Come on. Surround with. Formatter, perfect. Okay, so with AssertJ, I can write stuff. So I have to import the correct assert that. not this one. This one. So the one from org.assertj.core API. I pass what I want, and it will suggest stuff based on the types I have here. So if I do a dot here, it knows it's a collection, so I might be wanting to assume stuff on its size. And then I can either do a new assert below here, books, and then assert more stuff, or you can do fluent style. So as has size this, I want to filter it. I want the books such as book.get author, or author, sorry, last, or ends with, right? Like, so we have two authors that end with an N, right? So that has a size of 2, and then contains exactly the 5th season and the 3-body problem, right? So with this, that's size 2. Oh, and then now I'm trying to match books against strings. So that doesn't work, right? It says, oh, I want a collection of books, you give me strings. Of course, I have to extract the title, so I can extracting book title, right? So only the books where the author ends with N, I want just the title, and I check. And now I can run, ooh, I think I'm running the wrong test. I want to run this test here instead. It works. If I get my assertions wrong, so if I take the 5th season here and I put it at the end, right, and run this again, I get a nice error message because it says, well, you wanted the 3-body problem and the 5th season exactly and in the same order, but the order is reversed. So at index 0, you expected this, but you got that instead. At index 1, you expected this, you got that instead. And so if I want to discover more matchers, it's very easy to do and say like, oh, well, instead here of contains exactly, I'm going to do contains, and then I look at, oh, contains exactly, elements of, oh, contains exactly in any order. Maybe it's a set, I don't care about the order, so I can use contains exactly in any order. That's what we've seen with mock MVC tester, actually. So in the to-do mock MVC tests in here, we're doing AssertJ, has status, has redirect URL, because the Spring team, the Spring Boot and Spring Framework team has worked to integrate our objects so that they have nice assertions. That means that AssertJ is extensible, that you can create your own assertions for your own use cases. If you have like 5,000 asserts that are complicated and you're extracting data every time, you can write your own matchers. It's a bit long, so I'm not going to do it live here. But if we look at the example of the Tomcat test here, here's the output. You could do something that assert that log line, I think I called it. Nope. Okay, let's try it with this assertions dot, not this assertions. Is it public? No, it's not public. Oh, okay. Assertions, my assertions, assert this one. Assert that log line, that log, right? So last log line, and then you can do, I don't know, has IP 127.0.0.1. So in the repo, you'll be seeing how you can write your own matchers. So you can do it. You can ask a ChatGPT to write that for you. Usually, it kind of works. It's okay. What you should really be doing instead is probably looking at the docs. So takeaways: AssertJ, great, fluent assertions. It's integrated with mock MVC tester. You can write your custom assertions. If you're going to write your custom assertions for 2 tests, that's probably not a good trade-off. You're going to be writing a lot of infrastructure code that is not used that much, right? So if you want to look at what this looks like, these classes, and it does a bunch of stuff, right? And I want to make it nice. So there's a lot of code that would be maintained. Don't do that for just 2 tests. If you have 50 tests that use this, that's a great fit. Output capture extension when you want to read standard in, standard out. If you want to learn how to write your assertions, you can ask an LLM, but really what you should be doing is looking at the docs. So you go online, you do AssertJ docs, and this is where we realize these are my people. This is as beautiful as my application development. everything is in here. Everything is in here. Everything you need, like details for like extensions they have, and then I want to extend assertions, and or here's all the details of how you can do it. It's a great content. It doesn't take that long to find what you want and discover what you can do using docs. Okay, good. A few questions. All good. No, all good. Great. All right. So, do you need a break? So it's been an hour, we have 50 minutes left. Right, no one wants a break. You will regret this in 30 minutes, I swear. You are allowed to fall asleep. I will not shame you by pointing at you in the audience. So, back to Spring Boot testing. So we mentioned, like, these costs that you pay when you bootstrap your app, right? Your test context, it's a bit long, it's a bit painful, and you want to avoid having as many contexts as possible. Sometimes you may want to test some specific pieces of your application, not everything, and not have to pay the price. So if I'm like doing some custom validation on the web layer and I want to test that validation, I can do it with Spring Boot Test without bootstrapping all my Hibernate entities, which are expensive to do. And so this is where Spring Boot provides test slices. So test slices is knowing Spring Boot knows technical stuff about your application. So it can decide, I want to test only the web layer, only the data layer, only the GraphQL integration, only the LDAP stuff that you're doing. So the way you do it is, let's call this to-do web MVC tests. And so instead of doing add Spring Boot test as we did before, you do add web MVC test. This web MVC test, it actually says it in the Java doc. This is to focus on Spring MVC, so servlet stack web stuff. And it tells you what it is. So it's controller advice, filters, security filter chain, message converters, stuff like that. So it will find all your controllers. It will find all your beans of type, HTTP message converter, load that in that context, and make it available for testing. So if I add a test here, say delete to do, right? So if I do this, it will find all the controllers in my app. There's one. All right. So there's one controller. That controller has one dependency, to-do service here. The to-do service is a service. I'm very good at naming. So the to-do service, being a service, will not be loaded in that context. So if I try and run this test here, it will not work because it doesn't know about it's missing a service, right? In here, well, there I have a lot of debug, but in the end it tells me, blah, 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 to-do controller required a bean of type to-do service, and you don't have one. So you have to provide your own. So you can provide one by having a configuration, if you will. You can put a test configuration here, which is a configuration class, static class foo config, right? Then you could provide a bean here of type to-do service if you want. If you want to provide your own stub, for example, or like the easy way is adding a Mockito bean, Mockito bean, here we go, and then to-do service, right? So this will put a to-do service mock bean in the context, so the context can start, and it can start fast. We don't have our snail friends going in here, right? Because the slow bean is not a web-related bean, so it's not loaded here, and it goes fast. This web MVC test, it filters what you have, and it also already has auto-configure web MVC. So in here, you could have auto-wired mock MVC tester, call MVC, and then we could do MVC.post. URI is to do 42 delete, and then exchange. That's the response. I don't know if we care about the response. This the Mockito bean is the service where we delete stuff, so we could verify. This is Mockito. Import the verify from Mockito, the to do service dot delete, has been called with 42. So if I put 25 here, it's going to yell at me because I'm trying to delete to-do number 42, not 25, right? Yeah, me it says I wanted 25, and there was only one invocation of the smoke with 42. So fix that. Right. So with this, only the web stack. Maybe my app is not architecture in a way that is very easy to test like this. Maybe the to-do service, I want to include it. So you can tweak this a little bit. So one thing you can do in here is add which controllers you want. So you say, oh, I just want the to-do controller, not the other controllers. Maybe I want all controllers. So if I want all controllers, I leave this. And then I can import anything that is a Spring component. So configuration class, component class, service, controller, repository. So in here, I could import the to-do service, the real to-do service. This is annotated, oops, not import this one. This is annotated as @service, so I can import it. So now it's available in the context. But this one has the dependency on to-do repository, so I would be mocking the to-do repository here. To-do repository. So to-do repository, delete something by ID 42, right? So I can change a little bit the shape of my slice, and it will work the same way. If you try to write your own custom slices, you can also do it with @Spring Boot test here, and then you can do classes and tell it which classes you want in here. More like that, to-do controller. If you do this, you're going to have a few problems. So actually, let's do this. Let's actually do this. So I say I want the to-do controller and the to-do service. I think this will work. I've never tried it. YOLO. Auto configure mock MVC. So the same test, but I specify which classes I want. Okay. So this should work. I think it works. Okay. If I do another test, and I say main page, I want to see the main page. So MVC get URI is the main page, and then exchange, and then that's the response. Assert that response, yes, that is AssertJ, okay, yep, has status OK. So this works. Boop, boop, boop. Right. But if I look at the content of the page and I say the content must contain, the to-do header here, the H1. If I do this, then it doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work anymore because you're trying to do funky stuff that is a bit too complicated. So if you look at this in details, actually, it works in WebMVC, but it doesn't work in here because WebMVC test, there we go. This WebMVC test annotation, so it does auto-configure mock MVC, but look at it, it also does auto-configure WebMVC. And if you look at what this auto-configure WebMVC does, it actually brings on a bunch of other auto-configurations. So message source, hypermedia auto-configuration, time-leaf auto-configuration. So the problem with my test as it is it's going to tell me, well, you wanted to do, but you got a blank page. That's normal because I don't have time leaf, so I can't render the template, so I just have a blank page instead. So if I want to fix this, then I have to add the time leaf auto configuration. And then if I want to add what's it called, JPA, then I need to add entity scanning, and then suddenly it's like a mess. So don't try and do this. Unless you have very, very specific needs. You're going to be redoing a lot of the work and making things that are probably not as efficient as what we give you. You can also do, so one of the other slices that people use often is the data JPA test, but there's a lot of slices we have. docs.spring.io, right, /spring-boot. And so in here, reference, testing Spring Boot applications. But you can also like search for slice and you'll find test slices in here that works as well. And so in here you see all the test slices that we have for you. So Neo4j, Redis, LDAP, GraphQL, Elasticsearch, whatever you want. It's in here. You can use them. In the interest of time, I'm not going to dwell and do the data JPA test one, but it's the same idea. If you look up the longer version of this talk on YouTube, you'll find how I use the data JPA test slice. Okay, so test slices, they're lightweight, focused, faster, but they're technical slices. So they're horizontal slices that you have. They rely on what Spring Boot can discover of your app, not your domain. You have to provide custom beans or mocks to put the other slices. And so WebMVC test, we also have data JPA tests. You can write your own Spring Boot test slices, but that's very custom. One of the important things to note is that these slices, they're much faster to start, but they still start the whole Spring machinery. So they will take, I don't know, 50 seconds not 50 seconds. 50 seconds would be a long time. 50 milliseconds to run a test. 50 milliseconds is not a long time for one test. But if you have 1,000 slices, and they're all different because you only test one controller and you only provide one mock bean there, and then you have 50 milliseconds times 1,000, so that's 50 seconds, right? And so if your slices are bigger and they take, I don't know, 500 milliseconds, then now you have 500 seconds. So having many slices is not necessarily the good approach. It really depends on trade-offs. And a lot of things you can do with data JPA test, you can just leave it in a Spring Boot test and then inject the repository and work with the repository. Right? The data JPA test doesn't bring anything else. You can reuse the same repository across all your Spring Boot tests and you'll be fine with this. All good? Okay. The next bit is test containers. So we won't have time for everything here. Do you want to talk about test containers? Who uses test containers here? Hey, that's 30%, half of the crowd. Very good, I'm happy for you. Those who don't, I'm sorry, it's a great technology, but I know some companies don't allow you to have like Docker containers on your machine or in CI. Do you want to talk about test containers? Who wants to talk about test containers? 1, 2. All right, well, let's do a little test container thing then. So test containers is a technology that gives you an API in your programming language. It started in Java, so there's a great community working on the Java bit that allows you to run Docker containers from a Java program. So it's called test containers because it was geared towards tests, but you could technically use it to orchestrate a program that runs containers and like looks at the outputs and like glues them together with test containers. So you can see the details on testcontainers.com. And the idea is that they have a catalog of modules. So if your application is using a Postgres database, then we have Postgres for you here. So let's look for Postgres, right? So there's Postgres, but we also have variants of Postgres. So PostGIS, if you're doing, I don't know, geospatial stuff, timescale for time series, PG vector. I don't know, I want Kafka for messaging. I want Keycloak for my single sign-on. There's almost anything you want in here. And so, if you want to bootstrap this thing, you would need to do something like going to start.spring.io. So I have my existing project and I want to add test containers to it. What I would do is like kind of recreate my project. So I go and say, oh, I have Spring Data JPA, I have Postgres, right? Maybe I have Docker Compose support, so it runs on my machine as well. And then I do test containers. So I add test containers here, and then I can go and look at the configuration that's generated and add that to my project. So go to explore here. So I added a bunch of stuff, runtime Postgres. I'm going to take this one so that my app works in in prod as well. So we'll look at the dependencies in my build. Gradle. So I'm going to replace this H2 database by Postgres. Cool. I'm going to add Docker Compose so that my application can start a Docker container when it runs locally, so in development. Okay, this I have already. I'm going to add this Spring Boot test containers, which integrates test containers with Spring Boot. And then these test containers dependencies. So integration of test containers with JUnit and the Postgres container Java classes to start a Postgres container. So that's what's required. I'm just going to fix my app so that it uses Postgres. So to do that, let's see, Docker, compose, file. I need to describe Postgres in here. I have an example here. I'm going to steal that, copy. I'm going really fast. And compose.yaml. Oh, no, it's a file. Compose.yaml. Paste, right? So see, I don't invent anything. I just go to start.spring.io and I trust them. So class path is compose.yaml and good. And then in here, it's a Postgres database, so I need to use class path. It's called schema Postgres, the right schema for my app. So that I'm going to restart my app to be sure it works with Postgres. Oh, the slow bean. Oh, here we go. At least it starts. I'm going to remove the slow bean before I have to go there again. To do configuration. Slow bean 0. Great. Okay. So this to-do list, not this one, not this one, this one. So this one is running. And so with Postgres, I can do crazy stuff like give talk at devox, ensure the demo is running, right? Add to do, and in here I can search by keyword. Sorry for folks in the back, I can do it here. I can search by run, and so I use full text search in Postgres, and boom, I find my amazing to do that I added. Okay, it works. So now I want this in my test. Let's do to do. Not this one here. Let's revert this to WebMVC. Okay, this is good. So let's do one of these tests. To do mock MVC test. So this one adds a to do. So if I run this test, it's going to complain because I changed the database, right? And so it's very unhappy with this. Failed to load application context, blah, blah, blah. Failed to determine suitable driver class. I can't connect, right? I can't create a data source. So now I could try and change my the testing configuration to point to a real Postgres that's running. With test containers, I can make it spawn a container for that test that has Postgres in it and connect it together. How do I do this? Again, I go to the Spring Initializer project I created and I look at what it gave me. In the test directory, it created this test containers configuration, which I'm going to steal again. Not accept the package, right? And then I go here, I recreate it. Java class test containers configuration. Okay. And I replace this with this. Great. Okay. So now I have a configuration that will create a bean of type PostgreSQL container. I want to be sure that this configuration is used in my test. So to do mock MVC test, import the test containers configuration, not class. Perfect. And so now with this, I can run the test. In the meantime, I'm going to look at Docker. Ooh, I'm going to do it again. Docker PS. I'm going to look at Docker containers that exist. Let me pull up Docker so I can stop the other stuff. Hello, where are you? Where are you, Docker? Okay, Docker. Can't find it. Docker PS. Docker kill or PS-A is everything. No. PS can't dash Q. There we go. Docker kill. Let's destroy all containers. Right. And then rm those. All right. Just to be sure, I have no more containers. Okay, no more containers running. perfect. So when I run my mock MVC test, this one here, I start it, and I look at my Docker containers. It brings a test containers called reuk here, then a Postgres, and then when the test is done, it tears down the Postgres container, and this reuk container is an orchestrator that ensures that things are correctly cleaned up. And so my test here uses a real database in a container to run its tests. Now the problem is if I run all my tests again, since they're all deep integration tests except the web MVC test, they all rely on this container to be present. So I need to take that config and put it everywhere. So let's do that. Remove this here. Remove 3 tests. Remove 2 tests. And copy this. It goes into the browser tests. And then it goes into the Tomcat tests. This one. Yeah. Okay, run again. Let's see. Right. Okay, so all these tests, they run. I have no in-memory database. I have a real database. I could do tests that use the search functionality now. There's one caveat though. Sorry? Can I test? Sorry, what? Oh, the test. Can the test run in parallel? Yes, that's a good question. If you let me finish on this test containers thing, and then I'll go back to parallel testing. So one important bit here is that if I go to the to-do Tomcat tests and I put a breakpoint, I think there's a breakpoint already. So I look at the running containers, no running containers, and now I'm going to debug all my tests. Go here, debug all the tests. And then I look at the running containers. So I have reuk that comes up, right? And then a Docker, and then a Postgres, and then a second Postgres now. So I have 2 Postgres entries. Why? Because the way this configuration was set up, here, to do test containers configuration, I have a bean of type PostgreSQL container that's created. When I create 2 contexts, this PostgreSQL container bean is created twice. So now I have 2 containers. So if your configuration relies on 4 different containers, and you're doing 10 contexts, now you have 40 containers running, which is probably going to blow up your CI. So that's probably not what you want to do. So instead, if you're doing this, what the test container folks tell you can do is use their pattern, and their pattern is saying use singleton containers. So you can do that by saying, I'm going to annotate this, this class with @testcontainers. So this is, we're stepping out of the realm of Spring Boot managing the lifecycle, and now it's test containers managing the lifecycle. And you take this PostgreSQL container, you make a field out of it. Perfect. Not self, question mark. And you make it static. Right? And with this, you annotate it with container. So now the idea of stopping a container is managed by the test container lifecycle. So I'll have a bean, but the bean references the same container everywhere. So now if I run the same test again, and I look at the containers that are created, they will all reference the same Postgres here, even the Tomcat test, except if I get it wrong, right? Oh, because I created here. Wrong. Okay, try again. This should be in the field initialization. Hello, IntelliJ. Yes, no, maybe. Come on. Okay, IntelliJ is dying on me. It's fine. There we go. Don't update before a demo. What did you do, Daniel? All right, try again. So now I created at the static level. Ooh, great. Okay, I created at the static level. So it's created only once. It's started by test containers, right? So they create one, and then I get to my second test, the test with the Tomcat context, and now I have only one container. So I have only one database. Trade-off again, right? Because now this is smaller, less memory, faster, but I share the same database across tests. So my tests risk polluting each other, right?
Based on which configuration is the database created? If I have multiple usernames.
So the great question. So the question is, how do we select this configuration. How do we create this configuration for the database? So this test containers configuration here has a PostgreSQL container. This is the Java API for setting up your Postgres. And so in here, it has a bunch of setup already, right? And so they give you everything you can to configure at least the basics. So if you want to do a different username, you can say with username foobar here. So there's a few things you can configure here, and then you can. So this is just for Postgres, right? Setting the username has no meaning for a generic container, but then you can go into even the details. So you can say like with env, I can add some env as I would do in any container, or I could say with exposed port. So I can add some exposed port. I can do a bunch of things. The fact that it's a Postgres container in here, this is a JDBC database container. So that's a base class for all JDBC database containers. This is what allows Spring Boot to use the service connection. So with service connection here, it says, oh, this is a database container. So I know you want to plug it into your data source. So it reads the username. Even if I change the username here, it reads it from the configuration of this container. It gets the URL. This starts on a random port every time. It gets the URL, the JDBC URL, every time I need to wire a context. It infers it from that container. So all is done for you with the service connection. If you want to do advanced stuff, I'm not going to cover it here because our good friends would be deprived of their security testing stuff. You can also do stuff that's not supported. So Spring Boot supports test containers to a certain extent. Spring Boot, this one, testing, and test containers here. And so it will tell you all the container types that you can annotate with at service connection that will be configured for you. So I don't know, I need RabbitMQ, Redis, or OTLP logging, or Liquibase. That's covered by Spring. I don't have to write custom config. Now, if I use my container to spawn up an Nginx or like a wire mock thing to mock an external service, Spring Boot doesn't know about the details of how I wire external HTTP service. So in here, they will tell you how you can write this dynamic property source, which allows you to let test containers manage the container, starting on a random port. When it's started, it injects properties in your app with your own logic. So if this Neo4j container starts on port 12345, with this, I can say, hey, get the exposed port of that container, it's 12345, and add it to whatever property you use, and now your application can use external.service.url equals localhost 12345, which would take a little time to demo.
Is it better to use Playtika because it's configuration based?
Is it
Playtika OSS.
Playtika OSS? I don't know about Playtika
So
OSS.
that's actually use the test container, but with the application.yaml stuff. So
Ah,
yeah,
right.
so you don't need to actually add any code. It's just the configuration.
Right. That is interesting. Let's chat after the session. I would love to see that.
Actually, there is one thing. What about the test context? What does it do here?
So the test context here is not doing in that setup when we have a singleton container. It doesn't do anything for the container. That's managed by the test containers automation, and it does the bean wiring. So in your test context, you will have a PostgreSQL container, and this service connection is picked up by Spring Boot to then analyze and update the properties based on what it knows about this container, so the JDBC URL and so on. Good so far? Okay, so maybe just put the wrap up of this, test containers. So the setup from start of Spring.io is great. Like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, or if you don't want to look through the documentation, this is a project that works. You can like go grab the classes, put it in your project, and it works. Auto configuration support, service connection. There's this dynamic property source, dynamic property registrar now, I think it's called, which you can find about in the docs. And consider singleton pattern with static containers. Again, trade-offs as we said. So there was a question about running the test in parallel. So you can run the test in parallel. If you run your test in parallel with your test runner with Gradle, they will run in their own thread, and they will be completely isolated, so they will start their own container each. Running the test in parallel with Spring Boot test is a little bit, has trade-offs, because, oh, that's why it's, ooh, is it better here? I've been screaming and not, well, whatever. So it has trade-offs because the test context is not shared across test instances. So you tend to restart the same application in multiple parallel threads. So they can run in parallel, but they will be isolated from each other. Again, trade-offs. Okay, are you still alive? Are you still awake? Wow, wow, bravo to you. It's been an hour and a half already. So I'm going to mix and match the order and do the security so that we're sure that you get good practices when you get out of here. If you don't, if you disable security from your tests, I know where you live. I will find you. So for that, I'm not going to add security to this project. I have another project, a sibling project here. That's called to do with users. This one here. It's very similar to the same to-do application, but it has users. So every user has their own list of to-dos. So we go to localhost 8081 this time. And now when I try and access my list of to-do, I have to log in. So I can log in as Alice with a very secure password. Can you guess it? No, it's not admin. Password, yes. Second try, not bad, not bad. You're good. So same thing, we can add. There's no JavaScript. It's like do the thing. Fine, right. So we have to-do list. And to make this interesting, I also connected to your enterprise SSO, or some SSO here. So instead of having the users managed by my Spring Boot application, I delegate that to say Keycloak or Okta or Ping Identity, whatever vendor you want. And in here, I'm running the Dex project, which is an IDP as well that you can have users in. And so I can log in with my username and password. So this is a different website, right? It redirected me to localhost 5556. So I can log in it with admin@example.com. Guess the password again? Yeah, it's password again, yep. Right, so I can log in and that user has their own to-do, do the thing from SSO. Fine, okay. So we want to test this. And so the way this is implemented, close everything, security configuration. Yeah, like I don't think I can, maybe like this, yeah? Okay, I must not move. So it's implemented with, Spring Security, and there's a few dependencies. Then I put form login in, I put OAuth to login, and then I say any request is authenticated, and that's it. And then in my controller somewhere, to do controller, what's it called? Users, this one. So it gets the authentication to save the to-do for my user or retrieve the to-dos from my user. Doesn't really matter much. Okay, so if I want to run tests for this, I go here, right? And I'm going to call them security tests. So I'm going to do WebMVC test. I could do Spring Boot test, but I need the Testcontainers configuration and so on. So since the security is at the HTTP level, I can do WebMVC test because this thing here tells me in here that it actually like loads the security filter chain beans that I have. So as long as I provide them, they're here. So in here, I import my security configuration. I have user details, and that's it. Put some test. And auto-wired. Okay, mock MVC tester. If you use mock MVC, it's the same. It's going to be using the same thing. MVC, I think. That's fine. Okay, so if I do this, then main page, anonymous. So in here, if I try and access the main page, get URI slash exchange, that's the response. So if I assert something on the response, import this, no, wrong, import static this one. So if I do this, this one has status, it will be found because it's going to redirect me to login, and then redirect URL that ends with login, right? Because I'm not logged in. So this should work. Let's try it. Basic stuff. Oof. Oh, what's going on? If you've been following, what's wrong here? This is not starting. This WebMVC test, it's missing something. In this, it's not been authenticated, but that's not the problem. The test doesn't even start. Dependency, exactly. The dependency here, because our controller that's loaded here uses a to-do service, and the to-do service is missing. So, Mojito Bean, to-do service. Yes, you're awake. That was a test. It was completely planned, I promise. Okay, so this test works. It just shows that I can't access the main page when I'm not logged in. So let's try and access the main page by being logged in. Right, main page. And so the result of my test that I want is status OK, right? And the content, the body text contains H1 to do. Right, that's my goal, my end goal. So I could do stuff with the web client and like go into the login page, right? This page here, I should have put a logout button. Right, so go into this page and type and click, but it's very painful. What I just want to show is that when I'm authenticated, I'm allowed to access this. So the first thing you can use is with mock user. This with mock user, you can specify the username if you want, even with details like username. Username equals test user, and then it can have roles if you want. So admin user, right? Something like that. This with mock user is in build.gradle to do with users is in this package org Spring Framework Security, Spring Security Test. And so this simple annotation will not be sending any password. It will not be verifying the logic for your sending password. We assume this is correct because it's provided by Spring Security. You don't want to be testing the framework. What you're testing is your implementation, your permissions. Oh, when I'm logged in, I can see the page. This puts a username password authentication token in the security context with the user details inside. This test user exists nowhere. It's synthetic. It's created for that test only. So when I run this, hopefully, green. Okay. But then when I try and do more stuff, let's do it again. And then this time we add a to do. Add to do. Or like maybe delete. Let's do add to do. Add to do. So to add a to do, I mvc.post.uri is to do, and then .param. Wow, this indentation is glorious. Text is a secure to do. Voila, exchange. What is happening with this? Okay, so it does that, and then maybe we can verify version. Wow. Verify, import this one, that the to-do service has been called with add to-dos text, and the user was test user, so the user who added the to-do with us. So if I do this, of course, it's not going to work, because that would be too easy, wouldn't it? Okay, so it doesn't work, and it gives you a HTTP 403. So we could verify. I just verified that the thing is added. I could have verified as well, like, oh, assert that the response has status HTTP found, right? This one. So make sure that it redirects me. And this fails here because it's not a redirection. It's a 403. That's forbidden. Do you know how you can debug this? This is not a testing thing. It's a Spring Security thing. I'm going to teach you one Spring Security thing. you go to your application.yaml, this one here, and you do this. So let's do it from scratch, so we can have it in our brain. You go logging level org.springframework.security trace. Boom, and as I always say when I do this, voila, you are a security ninja now. Ninja, and your team will hold the feast for you. So you do this, then you run the test again. Let's run this one. Add to do, and then you go to this. So anyone has an idea what this fail? It's your friend. It's your friend that you always disable because you don't know how to handle it. All right. Okay, so something in the security filter chain. Post to do, securing post to do, invoking blah, blah, blah. Invoking CSRF filter, invalid CSRF token found, cross-site request forgery, the bane of your existence. Because, you should be using CSRF, you should not be disabling CSRF. It's a security issue, do not do that. So what people do is this, right? CSRF configure, disable. No. Scream. Right, don't do this. No. So if we wanted to do this, so the thing is, because this application uses the CSRF, and so in the form to create a new to-do, or to delete a to-do, so the new to-do here, it has an hidden field that injects the CSRF token for CSRF protection. So you could use a web client and type, and it would use that, because the CSRF token would be in here and would be done for you. You could use the MVC tester to request the page and then parse the page and then get the CSRF token, but that would be awful. Instead, what you do, in your security tests here, you say, well, I want to customize this request. This thing here has a with parameter. So Spring test allows you to intercept the request and the response and modify them. And so this here takes a request post processor. We have some security request post processors. So security mock MVC request post processors, bathe in the beauty of Java. It doesn't have factory here yet. I'll see if we can change that. And in here, there's a CSRF one. Oops, sorry. Remove that. Right. With CSRF. And now, Spring Security adds a... Ooh, it doesn't work. Yeah. Oh, it's the secure to do. Oh, my bad. It was added not with text, but with the secure to do. Oh, I missed my demo. All right. Hey, first try. You saw that, right? So in here, Spring Security does two things. It creates a CSRF token, it puts it in the request, and it also puts it in the security context of the MVC stack, same as with mock user, so that the CSRF from your request matches the CSRF that is known by the server. And we have a bunch of those, and they're super useful. You can pass custom authentication objects, like authentication, right? So one use case I have here, what if I added to do, but I don't want to be using a user details, I want to use my SSO. So this with mock user here, if you look at how it's done, is this with mock user blah, 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 and deep inside it does a new user thing. So it's a user details. If you're doing SSO, it's not happening with user details, it's doing some OAuth2 authentication tokens. So SSO add to do. So the way you do this, it's very similar to this. And I want, say, someone who's Daniel@example.com to add my to-do. Well, I can use this with, and now I can tell it, well, I'm not super sure how it's called, so I can do security mock MVC request post processors dot. And here you have all the details of you can do. So if you're crazy, you're doing MTLS, you can do X509, you can do OAuth2 login, you can put some JWTs, HTTP basic in the header, you don't have to write that by yourself. And we have an OpenID Connect login, which is what we do with this DEX identity provider. So I can have this. If I do it like this, it's probably going to fail because that admin, that Daniel@example.com, is not specified anywhere, right? So it says, oh, I wanted the secure to do danielexample.com, and it got the secure to do null because the email is not in here in this token. It's fine. This is a configurator you can use. And so you can say, oh, I want to change, say, the roles of that user. I want to change the OIDC user object, or I want to change the ID token. ID token. So the ID token that my identity provider sends me, I want to say ID token, add a claim called email, and that email will be daniel@example.com. Right? And so by doing this, it adds that. Ooh, did I get it wrong? Is it the sub? Oh, it's a typo. Oh no, examp. Here we go. See, I need a break too. Right, first try again. Whew. Okay, so you can change what goes in here. So what's interesting is that you're not testing the logic of like getting a token, parsing the token, validating the token. You trust Spring Security to do that for you. Instead, what you do, we say, okay, the login phase, that's covered by Spring Security. I don't have to test it. If I really want to test it because I'm doing really custom stuff, well, you could do a Tomcat, or like a Tomcat MVC test or a Tomcat test, run your Tomcat, like use a web client and do the full flows. But if you trust Spring Security to do the right thing for you here, then you just say, well, the tokens that I receive will have kind of this shape. And they're used correctly by my application. Okay? All right. Boop, boop, boop. So we didn't cover everything, but security testing, now you have no excuse. I will hunt you down. They're compatible with WebMVC, also with Spring Boot Test, no problem. They will be in there as well. So with mock user is when you want to inject simple synthetic users. If you have a user detail service that has custom users in it, you can use @with user detail service. And then you can use these security mock MVC request post processor to inject stuff in your requests. Note that this is not complicated code. This with mock user, it's not huge. So if you look at the details, they're used with this context factory. You can write your own. You can provide one of these and inject your own, say, OIDC login. So you could say with OIDC login and then just put the email. If you're on your own thing, this is also possible. Okay, we're all hungry. So I think I'm going to cut here, open for questions. So there's more. There's more to it in the repo. There's many examples of other stuff, like complicated testing of your configuration classes. There's a bit more about Testcontainers for the dynamic registration. There's stuff around Mockito I want to share, because these are my people as well. Mockito docs. I'll put that back up. Don't worry about it. So Mockito, you use Mockito. Mockito's great. It's probably more powerful than what you know. So you can say Mockito, blah, blah, blah. It says documentation somewhere. Documentation. Right. So here's the Mockito documentation. Right. These are my people. Right. Very good HTML. Lovely. Lovely. But it tells you everything. It tells you like how to use captor, how to use deep stubs. Right. Beautiful. Go read that. Go learn. And with that, thank you for your attention. Reach out during the conference. I'm here until 5 p.m. today, so come to me with all your custom testing questions, everything that's wrong. I want to learn from your production use cases. It makes us better in the Spring team. If you're not in the room, subscribe, and then you can reach out using the email, web stuff. And here is a QR code. That is a very secure thing to scan. Trust me. This is the feedback form for this session. Give me feedback so that I can make this presentation better. And hopefully, if you take 5 seconds to give me 5 stars, maybe they'll invite me again next year. Who knows? And with that, I have 2 minutes for questions, but thank you for your attention. You're free to go grab your lunch.